Tiger Woods does that great thing with the ball and the club and, all those trick shots. That's not what you practice. When you want to improve your game, you go straight back to the basics. And
fundamentals.
Boring basics. You hit 100 golf balls before you play that round. You dribble. You master the fundamentals. And that's why I think business should be boring, because we're always leaping to the next shiny thing and the next one and the next one.
Welcome to the Everyday Practices Podcast. I'm Reagan Robertson, and my co-host, Dr. Chad Johnson, and I are on a mission to share the stories of everyday dentists who generate extraordinary results using practical, proven methods you can take right into your own dental practice. If you're ready to elevate patient care and produce results that are anything but ordinary, buckle up and listen in.
Welcome, everybody, to Everyday Practices Dental Podcast. I'm here, Chad Johnson, with Reagan Robertson. Reagan, how you doing?
I'm having an exceptional day. Chad, every day is a good day when I get to podcast with you.
Absolutely, and reciprocated feelings, totally, and triciprocated, if that's a word. If it's not a word, it needs to be a word, because today, special guest for our roundtable discussion is Victoria Peterson. Victoria, how are you today?
Hello, Chad. Hello, Reagan.
Yay.
Hello.
Glad to have the OG on today, the original gangsta for Everyday Practices.
I can't believe you keep asking me back.
Shame on us. Well, today we wanted to talk about a controlling idea that Kashmir, our producer, heard you, Victoria, talking about recently, and it was trying to make your business boring, like make your business boring. And so I thought I'd at least frame it first. I got thinking it would be fun to juxtapose it with what makes business exciting. And it's the same as any relationship. When a relationship starts, it's fun to have it be exciting. But naturally, it seems very human nature that relationships go toward being unexciting, because exciting is exciting and fun and different and whatnot, but then there also needs to be some evenness to it. And we actually, as much as we don't want to say it, we do like predictability, and it's fun to occasionally have some change up and whatnot, but we do want predictable. So to bring it home for the doctor's sake, the worst thing that you'd want to do is walk in on a Monday morning and say, hey, surprise, we have an exciting day. There are 5 people already seated. 4 of them have facial trauma, and 1 has a broken screw inside 3 of their implants, and go. So,
Jeez.
Right, that's the kind of exciting that we want to avoid, but that's just clinical dentistry. But just to frame it so that way our dentist listeners go, yeah, okay. So exciting is great at the beginning of business. And yet, eventually, we want to get it to a point where it's less exciting. Victoria, tell us about that.
Well, I have this crazy philosophy that my life should be exciting and my work should be so predictable that it runs like a background operating system. Like, I am not freaking out about the mechanics of my iPhone, because if I were, that's how I describe boring. Like, my iPhone is boring as a piece of equipment, but it's really exciting what I can do with it. And I think that's the thing with business. And, I worked with and coached with Tony Robbins for a long time, and he had all of these amazing stories about coaching top athletes, and I could name their names, but coming from the OG, no one would know who they are, right? So if anybody knows Andre Agassi, there you go. But that's a long time ago. But he did.
Thanks for not mentioning Henry Ford. I just didn't know how. I just watched a biography thing about him. Sorry, it was fresh in my mind.
You don't go in there, you don't take peak performance to the next level by practicing your jump shot or practicing rushing the net or practicing, your great Tiger Woods does that great thing with the ball and the club and, all those trick shots. That's not what you practice. When you want to improve your game, you go straight back to the basics, and we call them
Fundamentals.
boring basics. You hit 100 golf balls before you play that round. You dribble, you master the fundamentals. And that's why I think business should be boring, because we're always leaping to the next shiny thing and the next one and the next one. And you do too many of those in a row. And then the team says, I hate change. This is awful. Why can't things stay the same? So you've got to lock and load where you're at and periodically come back to the basics and say, how are we doing with our time management? How are we doing? Are we really seating patients on time, or do we just say we're seating patients on time? So that's a boring basic. It's called suit, sot, goot, I think. Start on time, stay on time, get out on time. It's one of those boring pieces that make everything flow. But you got to look at it and say, are we really honoring those things that make our day predictable? Or are we on an adrenaline rush, just reacting? And then you get to high five each other like, oh my God, we survived. I don't like those kind of adrenaline rushes.
Victoria, I don't know if I told you this earlier this year, but I implemented a moratorium of change for 2022.
Oh,
That's right.
And so I just, I told my leadership team, traction style, for our meetings, I just said, here's the deal. We're going to have a moratorium on change, because we've been used to changing. So this year we're going to focus on making what we do better, and not implementing, anything new. And if there's something so pressing, it's going to require a majority vote, approved by all, that kind of thing, that we say, yes, what, we need to change because X happened or something like that, so fair enough that we could do something if we need to, an extreme measure, but otherwise we're going to have a moratorium on change. And I tell you what, it's been refreshing.
I think after this podcast, you may have to start a 12-step program for entrepreneurs.
Right.
Yeah.
And I might have to be the vilest offender to show up for the first meeting alone, I mean,
what has the feedback been? So you've been doing this for many months now in your moratorium of change. You're coming into Q4.
Yes. So what's funny is I'll say, I'm thinking we should do this. And they're like, no, you said no change. So they hold me to it. And I'll say, no, listen, we already do that. I'm just saying we need to do it better, so I can't think of quite an example, but if it's just like, when we greet people, for example, we need to do this or that. And they're like, no, you said no change. I'm like, well, we should be doing that already. So we can't get out of just anything. Go ahead, Victoria.
Well, that's a great question. What is the difference between process improvement, right?
Correct.
And implementing change? Because I also believe in that 1% course correction so that you stay on course.
Correct.
You're brilliant.
Well, we went to that Dental Sleep Solutions at the last workshop, and then they were like, you guys really tracked and we're taking good notes and stuff, and you had some of your team there, so let's get this implemented. And I said, oh, no, we can't implement that just right now. But I mean, I'm fascinated by this, but we can't implement it just yet. And they're like, well, sure you can. We can help you, and we can give you financing for it. We could, this and that. Like, there's no barrier why you can't get started. And I was like, oh, well, the only barrier is that we have a moratorium on change. And they're like, what? And I said, yeah, in 2022, we can't make any changes. So overall, the team has felt empowered by it, because we've kind of done this slowdown. We've been on a crash course the last couple of years of busyness and, fanaticism and growth and explosion in and implosion in and all that. And now we're, trying to just get on a steady course. So it's been edifying, I think, to the team. They've said so.
I think this is so smart. I mean, everybody's been on a different trajectory, dentistry especially, right? Like unprecedented blockade. That's now what I'm calling the shutdown. We were blocked.
Yes.
And then you got creative and said, oh, we like emergencies now. We're not holding them back. And you found a way to stretch that term. And then you were flooded with patients wanting to come in. Where do you see them with a staff shortage? I mean, there hasn't been a time to catch your breath.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, so it's one tangible thought for dentists and teams listening to say, maybe you just do a quarter of a moratorium on change. Maybe that just means for a month. I mean, what does your diet look like? Someone might have this amazing meal plan that they can hold themselves very diligent, and you're just a ho-ho and Pepsi kind of guy that you need to, like, you might not want to go straight to full vegan, but what does your course correction look like that you're going to get, a step closer to being healthier? It might not be a full year, but I'll tell you what, if you were to, it's not bad. I didn't get that from anyone. I had a pulse on the team, and I was like, you guys are going to like this. You guys are going to like this. We're doing a moratorium on change. And they're like, what do you mean? What do those words mean to you? But that action is going to matter. And I was like, well, it means we're not going to change a darn thing in 2022. And we're most of the way through the year, Reagan, to answer your question further. And they were like, so what's going to happen January 1st? And I said, I might just extend this moratorium into 2023. We're kind of enjoying our honeymoon here,
It feels like the difference between a toxic relationship and a healthy relationship. So surprises are great if it's birthday parties, but I don't think many teams enjoy surprises if it is constantly changing services, initiatives, or what have you. So I think when you get to January, don't you think communication is a big part of that? You could invite them into that conversation. Here's what I'm looking at. Yes.
If anything at all. Yes, because actually by simplifying our process and not chasing shiny stuff, it's kind of cool that it's just like, no, if we are a pizza place, and it goes back to the McDonald's idea too. Like if you're McDonald's, but then some of the early McDonald's shops were like, well, we offer hot dogs. And it's like, no, you're McDonald's. You will do McDonald's because we do McDonald's. And I loved that about that movie, whatever it was called, where the guy that was really into the process of it, Ray something, but he was way into the process. And it wasn't about like, well, we like doing, donuts on Saturdays. No, you don't. You're McDonald's. We're doing McDonald's. Now, if you want to start a shop down the street, do a donut shop, but this is McDonald's, and we're going to do McDonald's very well. And that was a cool takeaway from that movie.
I gotta love this. I'm actually getting very excited talking about being boring because it's the fundamentals that really get you through. And Reagan, not only are you an amazing podcaster, you're an amazing leader at Productive Dentist Academy, and you do it a different way. You do it in a 90-day plan, 120-day plan, and look at that. I think I follow your leadership in that you're much better at that sort of traction, EOS, business made simple focus, which is kind of boring to set up those frameworks. I got to fill out my agenda, know what I'm talking about.
It is definitely, it's my passion place. It is 100% boring for anyone who's a visionary, and it's not the best place for the visionary to sit, but it is a great place to have an integrator on the team that is really passionate about that. So I've seen office managers step up to that many times to hold the frame and the structure. And you definitely know I'm passionate about the business made simple frameworks that we bring into our own, Productive Dentist Academy to help us, because it's repeatable. It builds the trust with the team. We know what our roles are. We know what to expect on a repeatable daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly. I mean, you know where you're going, and that should allow freedom when it's run correctly. That allows the freedom for the visionaries to look forward and go out and see what's next, because it's as a business owner, this is the most dangerous place to be, I think, where it's working good the way it is. So do we just stay the course? And if we just stay the course and we don't evolve and adapt to meet patient needs, to incorporate the new science and what is coming out in that realm, then we fall by the wayside and we get stale. So
Correct.
it is like this constant dance back and forth. And I think the bridge that holds it solid is those operating frameworks. So yes, the way that you hold your structured meetings, what is said in that morning huddle is absolutely critical. Having that delegation in place to know that when the schedule goes off throughout the day, we all have a plan to get us to goal anyway. Those pieces to me, for visionaries, yes, very boring. But for
Reggie,
somebody, yeah.
You have a good point, because when I'm saying this, I'm also assuming that the doctors that I'm talking to are coming from a same place, that they've been progressive for years. I actually know that there's a good amount of doctors that are going to say, oh, yeah, I like that moratorium and change. It's just like, wait a second, you've been business constipated for the last 20 years and not changed a dumb thing. Maybe you should also push out of the envelope and say, we're going to have a year that we change stuff. So fair enough, like this needs to fit the right person. But those listening to, podcasts and looking for the next thing are probably a lot like me. Go ahead, Reagan.
Well, I have a different way for you to maybe think about the moratorium, if I may.
Why not?
I feel that
I'm not going to change. I mean, no,
So,
I'm just.
in the skincare world, and when do you wash your face, Chadwick?
Never. Yeah, I do. I just thought I'd be sassy for a minute. But yes, I know where you're going.
You wash your face and you rinse it off, and then whatever product you apply, you don't put your moisturizer on and then your wrinkle cream on and then your spot check like all at once. You can't do that. If you do, it doesn't have a chance to sink in, permeate, and do what it needs to do. So you need to kind of wait before you apply the next product. So that's what is taught in aesthetic schools. So the same, I think, really.
No, I washed my face, but then you lost me.
Yeah, I thought so. You wash, you apply, you let it set. Really, what I want you to think about is when you apply a change, you need to let it sink in. You need to make sure that it is adopted at the level with which you think it should be adopted, and that everyone understands what's going on before you introduce. So I think it's not a moratorium of change that you brought about. I think you were saying we have gone through a lot of implementations.
Correct.
Let's let that set in, be successful with that, and then strategically look forward into what we want to incorporate next.
And get Gino Wickman's traction. I mean, not just get the book, but to get traction.
Yeah, to get traction
just
as a
giving
company.
credit,
Absolutely.
as we've been implementing that concept. Yes.
It's the biggest mistake that I have seen is when you try to put in too many initiatives, you try to change too many things. And it's so difficult too. I have a lot of compassion for all dentists and team listening, anybody who nerds out on dentistry or whatever it is. You go to an event, you get all hyped up. I myself was like, oh, what was it? I don't even remember. It was some sleep appliance that I saw at an event down in Arizona. And I was like, I'm not even a dentist and I want that right now. So I was like on the wave of excitement. I would rush home to my practice and be like, let's get this in. I know how expensive it is, but we'll just make it work. We'll just change our schedules. Let's go, because it's going to help patients. That's a lot of energy for a team to take in. They weren't there. They don't understand how this fits into the whole plan. So I think let's give our leaders a little bit of grace, but
Victoria, that reminds me when you're talking on investment grade practices, when you're talking about don't be a 10 out of 10, like be an 8 out of 10. That's what I just heard.
You know what? You're going to love this new article I just submitted for Dental Entrepreneur magazine.
Ooh.
And it's called Investment Grade Communications. And I give Doctor 2 communication tips out of my new book. The first one is how to deal with the employee assault. Assault, when you're walking down the hall and they kind of tap you on the shoulder or grab your lab coat and go, hey, Dr. Johnson, can I talk to you at the end of the day? And you're like, freeze, and instantly have 5,000 really horrible thoughts about what that could be.
I love your solution to this, though.
Yeah. So I teach the stop, drop, and roll.
Yep.
And then the second one that I taught in that, because I could only choose 2 to put in this article. The second one was called Accosted at a Trade Show. And how do you deal with that?
Oh yeah,
I
I
have
don't
seen
even.
you be accosted at a trade show, come to think of it.
Yeah, and so I've got a trick. I'll send that one to you, Chad. And as soon as the article's published, we'll get it out through Everyday Practices channels too as a download for your listeners. But there really is a method, and this one you'll love it because it's based on being 5 years old. I know you are, but what am I? You remember that game? So when they're like, hey, this is what this new sleep appliance can do for you, this is what this mouth guard can do for you, you go, well, of course I know that. And we're going to give you a great show deal. Well, of course I know that. I know you are. But what else can you do for me? Can you do some team training where you give me this? And you just start asking for all the ridiculous stuff and you get it. And then you go, you know what? I really have to take this back to my team. They're the decision makers. So
That's right.
give me all your material and I'll take it back to the team. And, or if you don't even want to say team, you can say, I have a board of directors that I answer to.
Yes.
Like you give
My
it that-
leadership team. I mean, that's what I say.
Yeah. I have
You know,
partners. Can't do it.
it's along those lines that, when someone's come to me and said, hey, we have a sweet product or a sweet service, you should really implement this. Right now, I'm just like, well, they're not going to approve that this year. So why don't you get back with me, shoot me an email in January. And they're just thinking, what in the world? Like, this is the best thing since sliced bread. But I notice a lot of sales reps expect dentists to be the sole decision maker. So it's super easy for them to go straight to the dentist and say, hey, what do you think about this and that? And for example, with marketing, I love being able to say, well, my guy Dean and my marketing manager Sarah from PDA is going to evaluate this and then they'll get back with you.
Yeah.
And they're thinking, what do you mean? Like, you don't choose? Like, I need you to make a decision. I'm like, oh, they'll probably get back with you in the next 2 or 3 days, business days, but it's not up to me. And they're just thinking, what do you mean? And because this has a greater return on investment. And then I say, well, we'll see if that fits our budget, for this next year. And they're thinking, this guy has a budget. He has people in charge. And what's cool about that is it goes back to my decision-making on it is actually boring. I don't go to the team and say, hey, I have an exciting news. We're going to be in the yellow pages now,
Circa 1987.
Right.
Wow, the yellow pages. Do you know how empowering that is to the team? I bet you do. I mean, I'm sure that's why you do it, Chad, but it allows you to delegate. It allows you to delegate, but it also empowers the team. You're trusting them. You're making them part of that process. You're getting their buy-in from it. I mean, those elements are pretty darn critical to allow it to run like an iPhone in the background, like Victoria was saying. You trust that it will work. You don't even think about the details of it. It keeps you out of micromanagement that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the boring basics. I have a budget. I have a leadership team that I report to. We have to see how we could predictably integrate this into our systems. We need to plan our training time. That's not just the cost of implementing. It's all the boring background stuff that make everything else so exciting when you get it right. Then you go out to a movie, you have a picnic, you go to the lake, you take a vacation, you go to Disney World, you go to the Corn Palace, whatever you do.
The Corn Palace. Wow.
Mitchell, South Dakota.
Whoa.
Shout out to the Karmazins.
So you didn't over budget yourself in terms of time or money or effort. So now you have all of that energy and resource to pour into your life and those things that are fun. Mm-hmm. So that's what being boring is all about.
Mm-hmm. I thought of a John Coyce quote, and it's a loose quote because I don't have it written down right here, but he said something along the line of, everything improvised, and he's talking clinically, but it's the same thing. But he says everything that's improvised was planned and on purpose. So, and it's kind of a joke, but he says if it seems like if you were watching as a fly on the wall, as though I just said an improvised comment, it was planned. It was on purpose. My joke that would seem it's been planned ahead of time. It's, like everything that I'm saying is intentional. And he brings that back to the dental history. If I can be predictable in getting people's health history, dental history, and then, with an evaluation, I'll be able to have predictable results because he wants predictability. And he's teaching dentists, don't have exciting outcomes. have predictable outcomes, right? It's the same thing with your business. So beautiful idea, Victoria.
Well, if John Coyce does it, the rest of the world will follow. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, predictability is a very good thing. We could rip on so many different directions. I used to play improvisational jazz. And, when people are improving and they're ripping, it doesn't it blow your mind? It's like, whoa, you just took me out into space and you came back and the band was right there waiting for you. And you just synchronized right up. It's all improv. I used to teach improv speaking. All improv is very planned. It's when you've mastered your art, then you can begin to improvise, or what appears to be improvisation is really a master at the height of their game.
Yes.
And that's what people don't see. And so they're like, oh, you just wing it. You just improvise. And I go, I do? Oh, but that's a master at the top of their game.
Right.
There's such a disciplinary formula to that, Victoria. You gave me the greatest visual. I see that in many of our doctors. I definitely see it in Bruce, and I see it in Chad also. So I've always wondered this about Chad, because, well, it's interesting. You have figured out that it's a disciplined formula for sure, because and you've heard this if you've listened to this podcast, you guys have heard this before. Chad, you are a dentist, you're a business owner. You're also a really accomplished cyclist, and you play instruments, and you know multiple languages. Any time I see you decide you're going to go after a new hobby, you seem to be able to lock it in and be able to get quite a bit of traction on it. I think that's really interesting. And to your sake, Victoria, in building that business that is boring, I think also shifting perspective a little bit to that, and thinking of, instead of the adrenaline rush of success, predictable success, maybe just closing some big cases, looking at it from an investment grade practice point of view and moving that dial. To me, that would be exciting.
Reagan, you had the words a few minutes ago. If anybody wants to back up this podcast, I was going to say back up tape. You said, I love being boring because it means it's repeatable, predictable, and freedom comes from that. So I love that. Anything that makes things repeatable, predictable, durable, it's going to last.
We just gave all you listeners, we just gave you many, many big bullet points of advice on how to make your business boring and make your life much more fun and give you much more freedom. Victoria, any last parting thoughts?
Yeah, we'll wrap it up around change. You can't change the whole world, but you can change the whole world for one person. So just keep focusing on that. As I go into my office, how do I make my dental assistant's whole day today? How do I find one patient that I can just make their day? And for me, I'm not in the office any longer, so I travel, and I will go to the airport with a bouquet of flowers so that I can give flowers away, or I do little things like that. So little acts of kindness can really help change the world.
Beautiful.
No moratorium on that.
No. Reagan, your closing thoughts.
Oh, I love our roundtable sessions. Thank you, Dr. Victoria Peterson. It's always a pleasure to be able to just digest and dissect and talk about business. It's really been a fantastic many years with you. And I look forward to many more discussions about how we get to make business boring and predictable so we all get the freedom we deserve.
Yay. Well, everyone, thanks for being great listeners today. If you have any questions, share those on our Facebook forum when we post this or something along the line, or perhaps come to our workshop in September or March, and we'll see you there in person.
Thank you. Chad, that is so nice and soft. Come to the workshop. Come to the Investment Grade Practice Summit. Check us out, productivedentist.com. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Everyday Practices Podcast. Chad and I are here every week thanks to our community of listeners just like you, and we'd love your help. It would mean the world if you can help spread the word by sharing this episode with a fellow dentist and leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify. Do you have an extraordinary story you'd like to share or feedback on how we can make this podcast even more awesome? Drop us an email at podcast@productivedentist.com. And don't forget to check out our other podcasts from Productive Dentist Academy at productivedentist.com/podcasts. See you next week.